It was a quiet and unremarkable night in the home of Linda Curry, a woman known in her community for her warmth, kindness, and ever-present smile. At 49 years old, Linda had endured her share of hardships, but remained a beacon of generosity and hope to those around her. Friends admired her resilience, noting how she had faced heartbreak, yet never lost faith in the possibility of finding true love. However, in the early hours of that fateful night, everything changed. Linda began to feel an overwhelming weakness, her body aching and her breathing growing labored. Alarmed, those around her rushed her to the hospital, hoping for answers and relief. Upon arrival, the medical staff quickly noticed something unusual. The intravenous fluid flowing into Linda's veins appeared cloudy and discolored, an anomaly that immediately raised concerns. Such a condition was not typical, and the question arose, was this a tragic medical error, or was there something far more sinister at work? What followed would unravel a disturbing tale of deception, betrayal, and a shocking truth that no one in Linda's peaceful neighborhood could have anticipated. Linda Curry, born Linda Kincaid in 1944, had grown up in a loving and supportive household. Her closest relationship was with her sister, with whom she shared a deep bond of trust, laughter, and mutual support that would sustain her through many of life's challenges. To those who knew her, Linda was radiant and ambitious, with a heart full of kindness. She was admired for her generosity and the warmth she extended to everyone she met. Yet beneath this bright exterior lay a woman who had quietly suffered. She had endured the collapse of 2 marriages, each leaving her with disappointment and unfulfilled dreams, including the longing for children she never realized. Despite these setbacks, Linda remained determined to find happiness and build a meaningful life. In 1981, Linda met Bill Sandretto, a life insurance salesman. Their relationship lasted several years, but was fraught with financial disagreements. Linda's generous spending habits clashed with Bill's frugal nature, and by 1989, they had parted ways. Remarkably, they maintained a genuine friendship, a testament to Linda's forgiving and compassionate nature. That same year, seeking a fresh start, Linda purchased a spacious 2-story home in San Clemente, California, complete with a bright and inviting garden. Her home quickly became a gathering place for friends, filled with laughter, dinners, and the warmth of companionship. After years of personal struggles, Linda still believed that love was waiting for her. In 1989, Paul Curry, a 32-year-old nuclear engineer, began working at Southern California Edison, the very company where Linda had built her career, rising from secretary to manager at the San Onofre nuclear generating station. Paul was immediately noticeable, intelligent, articulate, and proud of his Mensa membership. That same year, he appeared on the television quiz show Jeopardy!, winning 2 consecutive nights and earning over $24,000 in prize money. Despite their significant age difference, Linda was more than a decade older, and Paul's reputation for arrogance, Linda found herself intrigued. She admired his confidence, interpreting it as strength rather than conceit. Their professional conversations soon blossomed into friendship, and over time, into romance. Paul moved into Linda's San Clemente home, becoming a fixture in her daily life. On September 12, 1992, they married in a small ceremony in Las Vegas. Linda was radiant with happiness, convinced she had finally found the partner she had long sought, someone stable, intelligent, and promising a secure future. However, those closest to her harbored doubts. Her best friend Mary, who had stood by her through thick and thin, sensed something was amiss. Even Bill Sandretto, her former partner who still cared deeply for her, expressed concern. To them, Paul seemed distant and self-absorbed, more interested in his own image and accomplishments than in Linda's happiness. He boasted frequently about his achievements, but showed little genuine affection toward his new wife. On the surface, life appeared promising. Linda and Paul had a combined income approaching $140,000 a year, a substantial sum in the early 1990s. They lived comfortably in Linda's spacious home, and friends assumed they were on a path to prosperity. Yet beneath this veneer, cracks began to show. Despite their incomes, financial troubles loomed. Bills accumulated, credit card debts grew, and Linda, who had always been generous with her spending, found herself struggling in ways she never had before. The picture became clearer when Linda uncovered some of Paul's secrets. He had not been entirely honest with her. Paul had been married twice before and was financially responsible for 3 children from those marriages. These obligations, which he had concealed until after their wedding, drained a significant portion of his income. For Linda, this revelation was a painful blow. She had believed Paul was her fresh start, her chance at lasting love. Yet she was not ready to give up. Determined to save their marriage, she forgave him and continued to open her home to friends, hosting dinners and speaking warmly of Paul, hoping others would see the qualities she admired: his intelligence, his stability, and his potential as a partner. However, concerns among her friends only deepened when Linda revealed that Paul had begun pressuring her to take out a new life insurance policy worth an astonishing $1 million. This was despite the fact that Linda already held several policies totaling nearly $1 million, with Paul himself listed as the primary beneficiary on $400,000 of them. To Linda, Paul's request initially seemed reasonable, perhaps even a sign of his desire to secure their future together. But Mary immediately saw danger. She reminded Linda of Paul's hidden past, the previous marriages, financial obligations, and debts, and urged her not to agree. Reluctantly, Linda heeded her friend's advice and chose not to sign the new policy. Yet even after that decision, the tension in their marriage never dissipated. By mid-1993, just 6 months into their marriage, doubts among Linda's friends had grown stronger than ever. Paul's behavior became increasingly cold and calculating. He spoke often of money, but rarely of love, seeming detached from the woman who openly adored him. Unsure of what to believe, Linda invited Frankie, a close friend and colleague from the power plant, to stay at her San Clemente home, hoping an outside perspective might offer clarity. During her visit, Frankie observed Paul's thoughtful and caring side. He prepared bubble baths for Linda every evening, brought her freshly made salads, and cooked small dinners with unexpected gentleness. To Frankie, this was the behavior of a man who loved his wife. She left reassured, believing that perhaps Linda's fears and her friend's suspicions were unfounded. But Mary and others were not convinced. They had seen too many troubling signs and contradictions in Paul's behavior. As the months passed, their unease would prove tragically justified. By the middle of 1993, Linda's life seemed outwardly stable, but beneath the surface, something had begun to shift. In July of that year, friends noticed changes in her appearance and energy. Linda, who had always taken pride in her health and vitality, suddenly seemed frail. She complained of persistent stomach pains that refused to fade, waves of exhaustion that left her unable to keep up with her usual routines, and a rapid, unexplained loss of weight. For those who knew her as lively and full of energy, the decline was alarming. She sought medical help, and doctors began running tests, searching for answers. Yet nothing conclusive appeared. Weeks dragged on, and her condition worsened. Eventually, she was admitted to the hospital for closer observation. To outsiders, Paul appeared deeply devoted. He was often by her side, attentive and caring, rarely leaving her hospital room. Friends saw him holding her hand, speaking softly, projecting the image of a worried spouse. But Linda herself began to notice something disturbing. One day, as she glanced at the IV bag attached to her arm, she saw that the liquid inside looked cloudy, its color strangely off. Uneasy, she alerted the nurses. Hospital staff quickly investigated, drawing samples from the bag for testing. What they found was shocking. The fourth fluid was contaminated with lidocaine, a drug used as a numbing agent in medical procedures, but one that can be lethal if introduced directly into the bloodstream. There was absolutely no medical reason for lidocaine to be in her IV. An internal review began immediately. Could it have been a tragic mistake? Or had someone tampered with her treatment? Deliberately? Suspicion soon fell on Paul. He had spent long hours alone in Linda's room, often when she was sedated or asleep. The timeline pointed squarely at him as the only person who could have slipped the substance into the IV without being noticed. Linda's closest friends were horrified. For them, this was the confirmation of what they had long feared, that Paul was not the loving husband he pretended to be. They believed he had both the motive and the opportunity, especially with the life insurance policies in his name. Yet, when confronted with the possibility, Linda could not bring herself to accept it. She admitted with heartbreaking honesty that if anyone had a reason to harm her, it would be Paul. But she refused to believe he was capable of such a thing. To her, it was easier to accept that the hospital staff had made an error than to face the idea that the man she loved could be trying to kill her. At her request, the case was quietly closed. After 21 days in the hospital, Linda's health seemed to improve. She was discharged and returned home, determined to put the ordeal behind her. She tried to rebuild her strength, to focus on her marriage, and to reclaim the normal life she had always wanted. For a brief time, it appeared as though she might succeed, but only a few months later, in December 1993, the nightmare returned. The same symptoms came back with a vengeance: piercing abdominal pain, overwhelming fatigue, and drastic weight loss. Once again, Linda was admitted to the hospital, and once again, doctors noticed something strange. Her IV fluids looked unusual, clouded, and suspicious. Laboratory tests confirmed the worst. Lidocaine had been found in her system again. This time, the hospital acted swiftly. A bold decision was made. No one would be allowed inside Linda's room without a nurse present. A sign was taped to her door, a visible shield meant to protect her. The unspoken message was clear. The restriction wasn't for every visitor. It was directed at one man in particular, Paul Curry. Despite the suspicions swirling around him, Paul Curry wasn't ready to give up. He tried to outsmart everyone by arranging for Linda to be transferred to a different hospital department, somewhere the staff wouldn't know about the earlier incidents with the contaminated IV bags. But the plan didn't work. It didn't take long for authorities to realize the same pattern was happening again. Once more, Paul denied any involvement. He remained calm even as police questioned him. And once more, Linda defended her husband, refusing to believe that the man she had married could be capable of harming her. Against her friend's pleas, she insisted it was all a mistake. Her health improved during her stay, and before long, she was preparing to return home. But just before her release, something strange happened. Linda asked her best friend Mary to stop by the house and bring her a few personal belongings to the hospital. When Mary walked into Linda's living room, she froze. Scattered across the coffee table were stacks of papers, life insurance policies. To Mary's shock, many of them listed Paul Curry as the beneficiary. She immediately told Linda what she had seen, assuming her friend had simply forgotten them there. But Linda's response was unsettling. She explained that when she left the house, the papers hadn't been out. That meant Paul had been going through them, calculating perhaps how much money he would stand to inherit if Linda were gone. To Mary, the picture was becoming clear. Paul wasn't the devoted husband he pretended to be. He was a man with a motive. Yet, Linda, desperate not to admit another failed relationship, refused to accept it. She clung to the belief that Paul loved her, ignoring her friend's desperate pleas to leave him. As Linda's health improved, she was discharged once again and returned home to the very man so many suspected. The friendship between Linda and Mary began to fade after that. Their once frequent calls and visits grew fewer, and a silence settled between them. Then, on June 9, 1994, Mary received something she never expected, an email from Paul. It was the first time he had ever reached out to her directly. His words were chilling. He told her that Linda was gravely ill and might not survive. Hours later, just after midnight, Paul dialed 911, reporting that his wife was unresponsive. By the time paramedics arrived at the Curry home in San Clemente, it was already too late. Linda Curry was dead. The news devastated those who loved her. For Mary and the rest of Linda's friends, the tragedy confirmed what they had feared all along, that Paul was behind her death. Toxicology results soon revealed the horrifying truth. Linda's body contained lethal levels of nicotine, a substance she despised and would never have willingly consumed. Along with it, doctors found a significant amount of a sleep aid in her system. This combination left little doubt someone had poisoned her, and that someone had access, motive, and everything to gain. After Linda's death, Paul Curry wasted no time collecting the money from her life insurance and retirement plan. He claimed a total of $419,000. But he didn't walk away with everything. Because Linda had named her sister in her will, part of the estate went to her as well. That decision spoke volumes about their relationship. Linda had no children of her own, but she wanted to make sure her sister would always be provided for. Then came another shocking revelation. The truth about Paul's carefully constructed image began to unravel. Investigators learned that he had lied about much of his life. Despite what he had told Linda, Paul Curry was not an engineer. He had never even finished his degree. His boasts about being a Mensa member were fabricated. His employers at Southern California Edison eventually uncovered the deception, but instead of exposing him, they quietly allowed him to resign, ensuring that no trace of his lies appeared on his record. With his past catching up to him, Paul sold Linda's beautiful San Clemente home and moved halfway across the country to Salina, Kansas. There, he reinvented himself once again, securing a job as a city building inspector and even remarrying a woman named Teresa. To the outside world, it looked as if he had successfully moved on with his life, but the shadow of Linda's death never disappeared. Behind the scenes, the investigation remained alive. Though no physical evidence directly tied Paul to the poisoning, one determined investigator refused to let the case fade away. Her name was Yvonne Schul, and she believed the answer lay in logic and persistence. For Schul, the facts were simple. Linda's body contained a lethal amount of nicotine. She had also been given a powerful sleep aid. That combination meant she could not have administered the deadly dose herself. On the night she died, there had only been two people in the house, Linda and Paul. If she couldn't have done it, then the answer pointed directly to him. In 2007, more than a decade after Linda's death, Schul officially reopened the cold case. She began piecing everything back together: Linda's sudden illnesses, the mysterious IV bags, the insurance documents, the toxicology reports, and the contradictions in Paul's story. But she knew she needed more. Evidence was thin, and the case had grown cold for a reason. So she turned to psychology. In 2009, Schul contacted Paul Curry directly. She posed as a friendly investigator, just trying to wrap up some lingering details. Paul, still confident he had fooled everyone years earlier, agreed to talk. Over the phone, he opened up again and again, never realizing every conversation was being recorded. Schul never accused him. Instead, she listened, acting sympathetic, even a little naive. Bit by bit, Paul began to contradict himself, changing details about how he discovered Linda's body, stumbling over what medication she had taken, and slipping into small admissions that hinted at knowledge only the killer could have had. When Schul finally arranged to meet him in Salina, she kept her calm demeanor. They spoke for over an hour, Paul seemingly at ease, convinced he remained in control. Then, at the perfect moment, she gave the signal. Local officers moved in, and after more than 15 years of suspicion, Paul Curry was placed under arrest for the 1994 murder of his wife, Linda Curry. In court, prosecutors laid out the case. Expert testimony revealed that Linda had been deliberately injected with liquid nicotine while sedated. It was the very scenario her friends had warned her about. And now, nearly 2 decades later, the truth was laid bare. On September 11, 2014, Paul went on trial in California. By the end of that month, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances, along with insurance fraud. He received the maximum sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Linda's sister, who had always suspected Paul, the verdict brought long-awaited justice. She had worked closely with investigators, keeping her sister's memory alive and pushing for answers when others had moved on. Linda Curry, remembered by those who loved her as compassionate, loyal, and full of warmth, had dreamed only of love and stability. But in trusting the wrong man, she unknowingly placed her life in grave danger. Paul Curry, the man who promised to care for her, instead betrayed her in the worst way possible. It would take 20 years for the truth to catch up with him. And while justice finally came, it could never erase the pain of losing Linda, a woman whose life was stolen by greed and whose story continues to echo as a warning of the darkness that can hide behind a carefully constructed mask. Rest in peace, Linda. You will never be forgotten. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.